In this video, we'll talk about how you can consume OData data sources in your Alpha Anywhere applications. So OData is a standard way of exposing data through a REST API. And you can see over here we have an OData service running on localhost on port 5320. This is a service that was built using Visual Studio, but of course the OData service could be built in many different ways. So our service here is called WCF Data Service 1, and when we hit this endpoint, we get to see here the OData response shows us all of the tables or collections that are in this service. So if we, for example, go over here and we go to the customer's endpoint and pass in the primary key, the OData service here is returning the data for that particular customer. So this particular OData service is OData 2.0, which sends back responses in XML format, but Alpha supports OData 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, and those services typically use JSON. So we will work with both XML formats and JSON formats. So this is the OData service right now running on port 5320. So let's go back to Alpha right now and show, for example, how we can build a grid component that uses this OData service as its data source. So if we go over here to this grid, we'll open up the grid in the grid builder, and let's go take a look now at the connection string. So you'll see that the connection string that we're using is OData Northwind, and if we edit this connection string, let's just go here to OData Northwind, we'll see that this connection string looks quite different than connection strings you might have been used to seeing in the past, because the Alpha API here shows OData and then the base URL is the endpoint of this OData service. So when we go ahead and we wanted to create a new connection string, let's go here and say new, we can just call it connection that, and then when we open up the connection type, we'll see that in the list of available connection types over here we have under the services, database as a service, we have OData listed over there. So basically once you select OData, then you'll see that the builder here is going to prompt for the base URL. So that's the URL of the OData service, and then an optional user ID and password. So we are using an OData connection string over there, and then from this point onwards, now that we have our connection string that is pointing to the OData service, building this grid is no different than if we were going against a SQL backend. So we'll go ahead here and connect, and then if we click this button over here, we get to see all of the tables that this OData service exposes. So we'll choose the customer table, then we'll go over to the fields tab, and then we see in the fields tab all of the fields that the OData service told us were in this customer table. And then we can go ahead and run our component. So we'll go there and run our grid component. Let's click on say page number 6 over there, click on a particular record over there, go make an edit. So let's go there, hit the save button and edit that record, and there we can see the data being edited. So behind the scenes what's happening here is that we have taken this OData service, which is a REST service, and made it look to the grid builder like it was a SQL database. And so you're just using a standard grid that is now pointing to an OData service as opposed to a SQL backend. And we can actually see what's going on behind the scenes if we go to the trace window and see what the commands are that are being executed by this grid. So if we go now to the trace window and we go over to the SQL tab here, we can see behind the scenes what's happening. So let's pause now and pick this up in the next video. So we're continuing now with our look at how you can use OData services in Alpha. So let's actually clear this out, and then so we can see what's going on more easily. And now go here and we'll navigate to the next page of records. And now let's go back and look at our trace window. So you can see that what happened was when we navigated to the next record, Alpha did a SQL statement here called select first 71 records from this table. But behind the scenes, Alpha took this SQL statement and turned it into a REST call. So this is the actual URL, the endpoint of the URL that Alpha actually hit. So this, if I copy this URL over here and go now back to my REST service over there and paste that URL in over there, you can see that basically there's the response that I get back from the web service. So the web service, this REST OData service, has given me this response of data back in XML format, and then Alpha, of course, turned that into the data that the grid component could display. So now let's clear this again and go ahead now and make an edit. So we'll go there and hit the save button and then hit save over there, and now look at what happens. So we can see here, for example, is our update statement, and this update statement got turned into a REST endpoint. So there's the REST endpoint that we're hitting, and since this is an update, there's going to be a post body that is sent along when we make this call to this REST endpoint over here, and there's the post body that got sent to the service in order to update the data. So the key point that we are making over here is that once you've made your connection to this OData service, you can now start working with this data as if it were a SQL table. You're just working with standard SQL and interacting with the service. So let's go back, for example, to the interactive window and execute standard alpha DAO commands against this REST OData endpoint. So I'll go here and say dim cn as SQL : connection cn.open, and now we're going to open our OData connection. So I believe we were using OData Northwind over there. So now we basically have a connection to that OData service. If I go now and do a standard.list tables, basically there's our standard SQL list tables. Now let's go here and say cn.execute select star from customers where city equals London. So basically now rs equals cn dot result set and then question mark rs dot to string, and basically there's our results of customers in London from that OData endpoint. So what we've shown over here is how basically in Alpha Anywhere you can basically make connections to OData services, and once you've made a connection to once you've made this connection to this OData service and you now have a named connection string, you can use the OData service throughout your Alpha applications. You can build grids, you can build lists, you can build UX components, and you can execute standard Alpha DAO commands against the OData service. Thanks very much for watching. In the previous video we showed how you can build a grid against the OData data source. Now we're going to build a UX component that has a list with a detail view using the OData data source for data. So we'll go ahead now, and we're in our list builder. We'll go choose list, and then we'll choose the genie for the quick setup genie, and we'll go and choose our connection string. So we'll go there and choose Northwind OData. So let's go there and choose that connection string, and the table that we're going to use is the customers table. We'll go and choose a few fields from that table: customer ID, company name, say city and country, and then we'll turn on the detail view. So we'll go ahead and click the OK button, and now we've specified we're getting told that we haven't yet specified the primary key. So let's go into the list right now and set the list primary key. So we'll choose the customer ID field for the primary key now, and we'll also go to the detail view table properties and make sure that the primary key is set over there so the CRUD operations can be performed. So that's all set now. So let's save this, save our component as UX OData, and let's go ahead now and run this component. And so here we see our UX component with the list, and let's scroll down to say this record there, Lonop, and change this to and then go ahead and hit the save button and then hit the synchronize button. So that basically has now made the update against the REST service, and so even though we're using an OData endpoint over here for the data, the list is operating in the normal fashion, so there was no new functionality that had to be learned in order to work with an OData service. It just works out of the box once you've made your connection string. Thanks very much for watching.